Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation, with some breaking news. Russia is going to stop buying gold at a fixed price. Let's explore. Indeed, this coming to us from Reuters, breaking news today that Russia's central bank says it will stop buying gold at a fixed price. Why is this important? Because they had made a commitment for quite a few months out at a particular price that they would pay for gold. Let's get into this article here from Reuters. Russia's central bank said on Thursday that due to a significant change in market conditions, it would buy gold from commercial banks at a negotiated price from April the 8th. Amazing. On March 25th, the bank said it would buy gold at a fixed price of 5,000 rubles a gram until June 30th. You may remember I reported on that earlier and how it may essentially mean that Russia could move towards a gold standard. Since the announcement, the ruble has strengthened sharply against the dollar. 5,000 rubles was worth around $52 on March 25th and around $63 as of the recording of this video. And so that is pretty significant, which means that, hey, they're negotiating this thing because they're finding out that their ruble is worth a lot more, which means that they're paying more than spot price at the rate that the ruble is climbing. And so what does this mean? We'll get into that from another article that was recently posted as well, too, about this situation that came out before this news broke. So gold prices on the international market have remained stable at around $60 a gram, or $1,900 an ounce. In fact, as I record this video, the gold prices are actually up a little bit beyond that, $1,932.40 for the ask price. In fact, all the metals are up today. But nonetheless, Russia is one of the world's biggest gold producers, but the country's refiners were barred from selling bullion into the London market, which is the world's largest, after the Kremlin sent troops into Ukraine in February. In fact, they are certainly increasing pressure on Ukraine on multiple fronts. In fact, we've heard of atrocities that are being incurred there, which means that sanctions are tightening up even further from the United States and Western nations around the world. Now, if we look at, there's an article here that was posted a few days ago. Now, this says why Russia has put the ruble on a gold standard, but it's unlikely to last. And this could be sort of a foretaste of what's coming. Of course, this was written before the recent news about the ruble strengthening. And they surprisingly announced this fixed price for buying gold with rubles of 5,000 rubles for a gram of gold. It's the first time that a nation's currency has been expressed in gold parity since Switzerland decided to stop doing so in 1999. The gold parity was common practice by the world's major powers for facilitating international trade payments in the era of the gold standard in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The same was true in a slightly different way during the Bretton Woods era from 1944 until 1971, which was when President Nixon decided to end the system by removing the link between gold and the U.S. dollar. In other words, he closed the gold window, as it were. Putin's new arrangement is envisaged initially to hold from March 28th to June 30th as the latest in a series of ruble-related moves by the Russians, starting with the announcement on March 23rd that they would only accept rubles for European gas instead of euros and U.S. dollars. The author here predicted that Russia would at least extend this policy to oil, but it has gone further and signaled an intention to make it apply to all the commodities it exports. Others include wheat, nickel, aluminum, and enriched uranium and neon. The main goal of these moves is to try to ensure the credibility of the ruble by making it more desirable in the foreign exchange markets, though it also fits into long-standing attempts by Russia and China to weaken the U.S. dollar's dominance as global reserve currency. And of course, it's 60% held by nations around the world, 60% of the U.S. dollar. It's going to take a lot more than that, but they have been trying for quite some time. In fact, you may remember, for those of you who have been watching diligently this channel since about 2017, 2018, I reported that under the IMF that several of these reserve currencies, especially in what are known as the BRICS nations, to get together to kind of bully up on the dollar to make their currencies the more desirable ones. But nonetheless, that means that their currencies and most international goods are priced in which most central banks hold in their foreign reserves. And there's a chart that shows the ruble collapse in late February and early March when Western sanctions were imposed in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And so there you can see here what has happened here with the Russian invades, and you can see how this chart has moved. So after the big drop, the ruble recovered somewhat, which is typical in such situation. It says, in other words, exchange rate troubleshooting. However, the currency strengthened further after the rubles for gas announcement, and so I think that's part of the reason why it has not lasted. On the back of the gold announcement, the currency has continued to strengthen to about 83 to the dollar. As precious metals analyst Ronan Manley said, this makes sense if you reflect that the market price of a gram of gold is currently about $62. That's fairly close to Putin's announcement that 1 gram of gold equals 5,000 rubles, which effectively creates a gold-based exchange rate of the ruble 81 to US dollar to the US dollar. So the sense of the similarities between the gold standard and the Bretton Woods system. The UK's Coinage Act of 1816 fixed the value of the pound sterling to 113 grains of pure gold, while the US Standard Act of 1900 determined that the dollar should maintain a value of $23 or 23.22 grains of pure gold. Taken together, the two acts implied an official gold parity exchange rate of 1 pound equals $4.87. It was similar during the post-war Bretton Woods era. 1 ounce of gold was said to be worth $35 an ounce, and all other currencies were fixed to and convertible into the US dollar. Gold was at the center of the system as a way of making money credible. Of course, attaching the ruble to the gold standard comes with certain rules of the game that Russia will have to abide by. It should be willing to exchange gold for rubles with anyone who wants to do so. This was what the U.S. did during the Bretton Woods era, and it led to the system's demise, with U.S. expenditures rising to wage the Vietnam War. Holding dollars became increasingly nervous about the dollar's value and sought to exchange it for gold. Nixon's unilateral decision to end convertibility was for fear that the U.S. would run out of gold, which would have destroyed the credibility of the dollar. Since that decision, the world has moved to a system of floating exchange rates, and the price of gold has steadily risen as world currencies have become weaker in relation to it. The system has effectively been supported by a deal that the Americans struck in the early 70s that created the petrodollar. You've heard me talk about that before. The problem for Russia is that it is willing to exchange rubles for gold. It could end up in a similar situation to the U.S. circa 1971. Wars are an abnormal state of affairs which come with huge uncertainty. No reliable forecasts are possible, and markets are liable to overreact to new developments. We've seen that time and time again. Hence what I've talked about, the emotional status of the market. There's a lot of psychology in the market. That's pure psychology, folks. Pure psychology. Particularly in the short term, if confidence in the ruble falls again, many investors might decide to withdraw gold from the central bank, which could be extremely destabilizing for Moscow. And now they have decided to negotiate gold prices based off of a negotiated rate instead of a fixed rate, precisely because the ruble is rising in price and they don't want to lose their gold. So this is why, essentially, it would be tough. And so whenever this article is pretty much coming true, merely within hours, a couple 48 or so hours after the article was posted. The viability of Russia Maintaining a fixed rate of rubles for gold is closely related to what happens to demand for Russian energy. If the West can only slowly substitute away from its dependence on Russian oil and gas, the demand for rubles will help to keep the currency propped up, especially if the West does end up paying in rubles. But if politicians listen to economists and immediately stop importing Russian oil, gas, and other commodities, the ruble could fall dramatically, along with the whole Russian economy. And as much as this would cause a further spike in prices and pain all around, it may be the most efficient and perhaps even the safest way to induce Russia to stop the war. In fact, we are hearing about tightening of sanctions, new sanctions on Putin's daughters and others, and more sanctions by European countries as well, putting a tighter squeeze after the recent atrocities that have occurred, and nearly genocide in some of these areas. Heartbreaking indeed, but nonetheless, that is where we are at. And so Russian gold, and they're protecting it with a negotiated price, which essentially effectively means that its attempt or its move in that direction does not mean it was there, as I mentioned in a prior video. And this means that this could be a way to part from that gold standard by a negotiated price for buying their gold. Very interesting developments here, fast-moving developments, as we're seeing here with Russia and Ukraine, and of course other talk of economic talk about what's happening with the war and how it could affect the economy, especially Russia's economy, and as well as Ukraine, and getting wheat and other things and commodities out, and especially with what's happening there. And then, of course, the coronavirus in China, lockdowns in Shanghai now, all right, and imports and coming out of China are going to be affected, which means more supply chain issues, which means higher prices and exacerbated inflation, which has all been caused by the Fed and made worse by the supply chain issues. Nonetheless, there's where everything is today. In this breaking news, let me know what your thoughts are. I would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.